National Park Subcommittee legislative hearing of the 117th Congress. Our focus today will be on 29 bills, most of which are related to national heritage areas. 4 of these bills would create new national heritage areas in Alabama, Illinois, Maryland, and Virginia. Other bills we will consider would establish national heritage sites, national historic trails, national historical parks, and reauthorize existing national heritage areas. National heritage areas are designated by Congress as places where natural, cultural, and historical resources come together to create a nationally important landscape. These areas tell a nationally important story and help us celebrate our country's diverse heritage and history. These areas are lived-in landscapes and therefore require community collaboration to make sure the heritage areas are relevant to the local interests and needs. Many of these areas start as community-driven efforts focused on conservation and economic development. Just this week, a community-led feasibility study on establishing a heritage area in Down East, Maine was published. I look forward to reviewing that study and hearing input from the community about the possibility of creating a heritage area there in the future. There are currently 55 national heritage areas across the country, and today we will consider legislation that would add 4 more to their ranks. We will also consider reauthorization of many of these existing heritage areas, which will ensure that they will continue to receive federal support. While I support the reauthorization efforts under consideration here today, I think it's important to look at efforts to make national heritage areas more self-sustaining. If we continue to reauthorize all 55 of the existing areas while adding new ones, the amount of available federal funds continues to get divided by a larger number, leaving fewer resources available for the newest heritage areas that may need additional support to get off the ground. Another bill we will consider today is S-2580, the Alexander Lofgren Veterans in Parks Act. This bill would make passes to national parks and federal lands available to certain members of the armed forces, including Gold Star families and military veterans. I was proud last year that a bill many of us supported, the Gold Star Families Parks Pass Act, which provided annual passes for Gold Star families, passed in the annual National Defense Authorization Act and codified a program that the Department of Interior had implemented in November of 2020. S-2580 would build on that legislation and give these families lifetime passes and expand the Free Pass program to all military veterans. I look forward to hearing more about this legislation, particularly the department's position. Now for a procedural note. I will first recognize Ranking Member Daines, Vice Chair Daines, for his opening statement, and then Senator Heinrich. Following these remarks, I will recognize members of the committee who wish to make other statements about their bills, followed by any members not on the committee seeking to make a statement. After that, we will go on to the rest of our witness panel before getting to questions. Without objection, all members may submit letters of support or opposition or any additional materials regarding measures on today's agenda for the record. Now, Senator Daines.
Chairman King, thank you. As the chairman laid out, we'll be examining 29 bills. In fact, 22 of those deal with heritage areas. It's my understanding that the heritage area designations all have expired, and this subcommittee has the important job of reviewing each designation and the associated legislation. I very much look forward to working with the chairman to get these processed for our colleagues. I also want to learn more about the process for the designation of new heritage areas, including the role that local voices play in their establishment. Senate Bill 1942 by Senator Stabenow and Blunt would standardize heritage area designations. It's very important that this process includes extensive local feedback, so I'm eager to hear more from the witnesses and explore this legislation further. Today's hearing also has a veterans bill I want to explore more. Senate Bill 2580, the chairman talked about this, the Veterans in Parks Act, or the VIP Act, sponsored by Senators Sinema and Bozeman, would make access to our parks for veterans and Gold Star families free. This is something that Chairman King and I worked on together last Congress. Our Gold Star Families Park Pass Act was signed into law in 2020 as part of the NDAA, which made access for Gold Star families to our national parks free. Last Congress, I also worked with Senator Cortez Masto to get the Accelerating Veterans Recovery Outdoors Act signed into law, which would help get more veterans into our parks. I look forward to hearing how the VIP Act complements the efforts we've worked so hard to get signed into law. Before I close, I do have a large stack of letters of support for the following bills and ask they be included in the record, and that's It's support for Senate Bills 1329, 1942, 3336, 2438, 787, 1004, and Senate Bill 2490. Here's the stack.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And with that, I turn it back to you and look forward to hearing from our witnesses.
Senator Heinrich.
Thank you, Chairman King and Ranking Member Daines, for today's important hearing and discussion on national heritage areas and including my legislation to reauthorize the Northern Rio Grande National Heritage Area through 2036. Today we will discuss numerous bills that would extend federal funding for heritage areas across the country. For northern New Mexico, the Northern Rio Grande National Heritage Area has become a key resource in preserving and celebrating the region's unique cultures. Established back in 2006, the area spans 3 counties and 8 native Pueblo communities. It draws visitors from around the world, telling the story of New Mexico's complex and unique history while sharing our state's unmatched art, culture, and natural resources. Over the years, my constituents have shared with me the collaborative on-the-ground work between the heritage area and local tribes, schools, colleges, and grassroots community organizations. Recent projects have included support for a tribal youth farm at San Ildefonso Pueblo, community planning between the village of Chimayo and Santa Fe County, and grant funding to preserve recreational buildings like La Sala de Galisteo Community Center. Ongoing projects include the heritage area's essential work to preserve the region's expansive linguistic diversity, with languages such as Tewa, Tiwa, Apache, and Spanish being spoken and shared among residents today. Funding through the National Park Service for the heritage area is set to expire at the end of this year, and communities across northern New Mexico are still recovering from the devastation of the COVID-19 pandemic. Reauthorization would mean that important projects, jobs, and economic initiatives that support our state can continue. However, funding for heritage areas nationwide is also in jeopardy. This year, 30 of our country's 55 national heritage areas are set to expire, with an additional 15 expiring by 2024. National heritage areas are also consistently left in limbo, as no common criteria for their funding, management, or designation has been implemented since their creation back in the 1980s. Every national heritage area offers irreplaceable cultural and economic significance to local communities, attempting to rebound and rebuild from the past 2 years. That is why I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of Senator Stabenow's National Heritage Area Act, which would authorize an annual $1 million for existing and future national heritage areas while streamlining their designation process. In addition to S. 1942, would establish a National Heritage Area system with oversight for national heritage areas under the Department of Interior. We know just how beneficial heritage areas are to growing our local economies while sharing our history and cross-cultural traditions with one another. I'm confident that today's witnesses will drive home a point we already understand. Heritage areas are essential, cost-effective investments in our communities, and federal spending must reflect that fact. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your inclusion of S. 990 and S. 1942 in today's hearing, and I look forward to hearing from our witnesses.
Thank you. Senator Cortez Masto, would you like to make a statement?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Daines, for holding this hearing and including my bill on the agenda for today. My bill is the Great Basin National Heritage Area and Mormon Pioneer National Heritage Area Extension Act. It would extend the authorization for the Great Basin and Mormon Pioneer National Heritage Areas for the next 15 years, ensuring their continued ability to preserve and promote the cultural and historic heritage of the Great Basin region. It would also support our local businesses and expand recreation and conservation opportunities. National heritage areas help preserve our history and traditions while also promoting tourism and community revitalization. The Great Basin National Heritage Area, Nevada's sole national heritage area, is unique in the Silver State, encompassing stunning western landscapes, historical and archaeological sites, state parks, tribal areas, and Great Basin National Park. It was created by Congress in 2006. The Great Basin National Heritage Area encompasses over 13,000 years of human endeavors. Great Basin National Heritage Area and the neighboring Mormon Pioneer National Heritage Area extend across the Nevada-Utah state line, spanning an area as large as the states of Connecticut and Massachusetts combined, and are home to 21,000 residents. My bipartisan legislation will help safeguard this unique part of our nation's history, and I am proud to work across the aisle with my colleagues in Utah and Nevada to protect our region's rich cultural and environmental resources for future generations. Now, I know there are several other national heritage areas across the country seeking to renew their authorization as well, and I support quick committee action to process these bills and get this done for the sake of our communities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. Now we'll turn to our witnesses, the first of whom is Ms. Joy Beasley, Associate Director of Cultural Resources, Partnerships, and Science in the National Park Service. Ms. Beasley has more than 20 years of experience in historical preservation, and her current role involves developing policy guidance for more than 82,000 identified archaeological sites, 850 cultural landscapes, 26,000 historic structures, 400 ethnographic resources, and over 48.3 million museum objects, and more than 85,000 linear feet of National Park Service archives. Ms. Beasley, what do you do in your spare time is what I want to know. Ms. Beasley also oversees the management of the National Historic Landmarks, National Register of Historic Places, which represents more than 1.8 million buildings, structures, sites, and objects. Ms. Beasley, your testimony.
Chairman King, Ranking Member Daines, thank you for the opportunity to present the Department of the Interior's views on the 29 bills on today's agenda. I'd like to submit our full statements on each of these bills for the record and summarize our views.
So ordered.
The Department supports the following bills: S 1112, which would establish the Chisholm National Historic Trail and the Western National Historic Trail as part of the National Trails System. We recommend technical amendments for this bill. S 1620, which would convey the NPS-owned annex of the Liberty Theater to the city of Eunice, Louisiana. The city is the owner of the Liberty Theater. S 2158, which would reauthorize the Cape Cod National Seashore Advisory Commission until September 26, 2029. We recommend a technical change to this bill. S 2438, which would expand the legislative boundary of Cane River Creole National Historical Park in Louisiana to include additional portions of the Magnolia Plantation. We recommend the development of a revised legislative map. S 2580, which would make an annual national parks and federal recreation lands pass available to members of the armed forces, and a lifetime pass to veterans and Gold Star families free of charge. We recommend technical amendments to enhance implementation. The Department supports the goals of the following bills: SR 1284 and HR 2497, which would establish the Amache National Historic Site in Colorado as a unit of the National Park Service. The Department recommends aligning the text of S 1284 with the text of HR 2497 as amended. S 2490, which would establish the Blackwell School National Historic Site in Marfa, Texas, as a unit of the National Park Service. We recommend amending the bill to provide for a special resource study rather than the establishment of a new unit. Several bills on today's agenda relate to the National Heritage Areas system. The department recognizes that every national heritage area established by Congress serves an important role in preserving, interpreting, and promoting the unique characteristics of the area it encompasses. S 1942 would recognize national heritage areas as a system rather than solely as individual entities. The department establishing a statutory framework for the National Park Service's role in administering the National Heritage Area Program and explicitly providing authority for the NPS's ongoing important responsibilities as this bill would do. We recommend clarifying amendments for this bill. The department supports S 2296, which would designate the Northern Neck National Heritage Area, and S 2441, which would designate the Southern Campaign of the Revolution National Heritage Corridor. These proposed areas have been found to meet the National Park Service's criteria for establishment of a national heritage area. And while they may have merit, the department recommends Congress consider deferring action on S 511, which would establish the Bronzeville Black Metropolis National Heritage Area, S 825, which would establish the Southern Maryland National Heritage Area, and S 1643, which would establish the Alabama Black Belt National Heritage Area, while the NPS works with the sponsoring organizations to ensure their feasibility studies meet the criteria for National Heritage Area designation. For all 5 establishment bills, the department recommends conforming the bill language to that is typically used in other National Heritage Area legislation, and we also recommend developing maps for the proposed National Heritage Areas where needed. 16 bills would extend authorities for existing National Heritage Areas. The department supports these bills' provisions for reauthorization of federal funding for each National Heritage Area. We recommend standardizing the approach to federal funding limitations, as only some of the bills eliminate the funding limitation. Chairman King, this concludes my statement, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention to the variety and depth of the various bills. Our next witness is Ms. Sarah Capon, who's the chair of the Alliance of National Heritage Areas and also the executive director, Niagara Falls National Heritage Area. Ms. Capon has worked with the Niagara Falls National Heritage Area since its inception in 2011, when she worked to develop the management plan and build community partnerships to protect and preserve the natural, cultural, and historic resources along the Niagara River corridor. She is also chair, as I mentioned, of the Alliance for National Heritage Areas, an organization of national heritage areas and partnership organizations that promote the benefits of the National Heritage Area Program through advocacy and education. I can't help but point out, Ms. Capon, it looks like you have your raincoat on. Are you at the Niagara Falls?
No, I'm not.
I couldn't resist when you had that yellow sweater. Ms. Capon, your testimony, please.
Sure. So good morning. Thank you, Chairman King, Ranking Member Daines, and other distinguished members of the subcommittee. I am Sarah Capon, the Executive Director of the Niagara Falls National Heritage Area and Chairwoman of the Alliance of National Heritage Areas. I am respectively requesting this committee to support passage of the National Heritage Area Act of 2021, introduced by Senator Debbie Stabenow and Senator Roy Blunt, with strong bipartisan support from 14 Senate co-sponsors. In just 1 week's time, National Heritage Areas have collected over 650 letters of support for this bill from a cross-section of stakeholders who recognize the critical importance of NHAs. I respectfully request that these letters be entered into the record. In addition, I would also like to express my strong support for the other National Heritage Area related bills the committee is considering today. While we are making progress, the fact remains that 30 National Heritage Areas are presently experiencing an unprecedented sunset crisis, a crisis that was merely delayed until December thanks to last week's continuing resolution. For too long now, the lack of a long-term legislative solution has led to a challenging 2-year cycle of reauthorizations that expends the time and energy of this committee, members of Congress, National Park Service, National Heritage Area boards and staff. Most significant, though, this never-ending cycle of funding uncertainty takes away from the important work we do in communities across the country. As an example of this, there are currently 23 reauthorization bills in the House and another 16 in the Senate, all awaiting committee action. The National Heritage Area Act of 2021 would solve this problem. It would establish a system of national heritage areas and confirm their position as an integral part of the National Park Service, ensuring uniform standards for the way NHAs are funded, designated, managed, and assessed. The bill will also provide Congress with an enhanced ability to conduct oversight of the program. The National Heritage Area Program is one of the Department of Interior's most cost-effective initiatives, relying on a public-private partnership in which every federal dollar is matched with an average of $5.50 in non-federal funding. In 2020, NHAs leveraged $88.5 million in cash and in-kind support, greatly increasing the impact of the $20.9 million in federal funding received. More important than the return on federal investment, national heritage areas are catalysts for economic revitalization and job creation in their communities. They are often located in places that have suffered economic setbacks due to declining industries. Utilizing a grassroots and community-driven approach, national heritage areas help these communities build a new economic platform based on heritage tourism and outdoor recreation that revitalizes the economy and instills a pride of place for the people who live there. National heritage areas also bring the National Park Service mission out from behind the enclaves of federal lands, providing direct access to the people living across the country. Indeed, over the 35 plus years, national heritage areas have lived up to President Reagan's vision of a new kind of national park, which he expressed when he effectively created the program by signing legislation for Illinois and Michigan Canal National Heritage Area in 1984. Furthermore, national heritage areas have been and will continue to be committed to the preservation of private property rights. The program has always been entirely voluntary and cooperative, and we are completely supportive of the protections written into the proposed legislation, protections that strengthen and affirm the existing regulations for all NHAs. In closing, there are a few federal programs that epitomize the democratic principles on which our nation was built, like national heritage areas. National heritage areas truly are of the people, by the people, and for the people, and celebrate nearly every aspect of American history, culture, industry, and landscape. It is not an exaggeration to say that there is a national heritage area that appeals and relates to every American. Over the course of the last 3 years, the Alliance has pursued every possible legislative pathway to ensure that the National Heritage Area Program can continue to fulfill this critical mission without concern about a funding lapse. It has become increasingly clear that the most straightforward and sensible way to achieve this goal and eliminate the uncertain biennial reauthorization process is through a uniform system for authorizing funding and reviewing both existing and proposed national heritage areas. The National Heritage Area Act of 2021 will achieve these important goals and set national heritage areas on a firm foundation on which they can build and thrive. Thank you for your support from this committee. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Ms. Capon, you've worked with the Niagara Falls Heritage Area since its inception. Give us a flavor of what it's meant to the community. Has it had the kind of economic development and tourism impacts that you hoped for back in 2011?
Most certainly. I think that the community would testify to that. Our accomplishments in the last 10 years included creating a tourism infrastructure system that evolved around transportation that actually brought tourists out of Niagara Falls State Park, which receives millions of tourists, to other destinations, which extended their stay, which generated more economic impact for small businesses, small organizations, our historical sites like Old Fort Niagara. We created the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center, which is an interpretive site that it tells the story, shares the story, and celebrates and honors the story of the Underground Railroad. Again, that's outside of Niagara Falls State Park, which brings people from that enclave of a state park into other places. That specific site is located in an area of the city that has seen really tough times the last 30 years. The city of Niagara Falls is presently just under 50% of a poverty rate. And so these small efforts with a small amount of federal investment matched by a lot of non-federal funding have begun to transform our region. And in addition to that, and I think this is very important for communities that have suffered economic setbacks like Niagara Falls, it's beginning to instill a sense of pride and place for the people who live here, to really look at the history, celebrate it, honor it, but also to create jobs surrounding it. So through both those programs, the Discover Niagara Shuttle and the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center, we've had significant economic impact, but we've also created jobs around that.
Has the 5-to-1 ratio that you suggested in terms of funding borne out across the country at other national heritage areas? This is mostly local support, is that accurate?
It's mostly local support. So I can speak to Niagara Falls. You know, we are, each year is a little bit different, but we've gone up as far as 9-to-1 match to that federal funding. We have never received more than $400,000 for federal funding. So that's a significant amount of match when you're matching it 8-to-1, 9-to-1. Other national heritage areas are even higher than that, but every national heritage area at the very least matches it 1-to-1.
Thank you. Ms. Beasley, last year the department started providing the park passes for Gold Star families, and you testified, I believe, in support of the bill that would extend this benefit to veterans. I guess the first question is, do we have enough data to know how the free pass program worked? And I'm particularly interested in whether there were problems at the park gate in terms of identifying yourself with the group that has the free pass. How do you anticipate handling that in the future? And what do you anticipate would be the fiscal impact of this free pass to all veterans? Thank you.
Sure, thank you for your question. We certainly know that there will be a revenue impact as a result of the bill, but we don't have specific data on that at this time. As you're aware, there were certain passes that went into effect under secretarial order in 2020, but that was all occurring at a time when a lot of parks were already experiencing decreased visitation as the result of the pandemic. So we just don't have a lot of clear data on what the revenue impacts ultimately will be.
But I take it that in your testimony where you supported the bill, you believe that the revenue impact will be manageable. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. We believe that veterans and members of the armed forces and their families should have free access to public lands. And in terms of part of your earlier question, the amendments that we're recommending, we believe would help facilitate the implementation of the bill and would ensure that that folks who are accessing those benefits would have a great customer service experience and kind of a seamless experience being able to visit their public lands, irrespective of whether it was a national park unit or not.
Thank you. I appreciate the administration's support of this legislation. Mr. Daines.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Beasley, Ms. Capon, Montana currently does not have a national heritage area, but recently there's been interest and a proposal to designate the Big Sky Heritage Area in Cascade County. The city of Great Falls is the county seat there in Cascade County. Can you explain to me the process that a proposed heritage area must go through before it's designated? And what role does local support or local opposition play in that process? We'll start with Ms. Beasley.
Thank you. So we believe it's vitally important for us to have the ability to assess whether the conditions exist to form and implement a successful heritage area. And we access that information through a feasibility study process, ideally prior to Congress acting to designate a heritage area. Feasibility studies can be undertaken by the National Park Service if we're authorized to do so by Congress, or they can be undertaken by a local entity. And then we review those feasibility studies. And those studies help us gather information to determine whether an area contains the kinds of resources that tell a nationally significant story, whether there are partnership opportunities, whether there's the organizational capacity to manage a heritage area, and so forth. And one of the feasibility criteria that is considered is community support. And those feasibility studies include a substantive public engagement process. So there are opportunities, many opportunities for the community's voice to be heard during the process of the feasibility study. And as you're well aware, ultimately it's up to Congress to determine whether a heritage area will be designated.
Right. Ms. Capron?
So my experience with the National Heritage Area, particularly in Niagara Falls, is that the community support is essential. It's essential for the development of the management plan. This is my management plan. You could see that it's well loved, but that was all developed, not from the top down, but from the bottom up. That was developed by stakeholder groups in the community, focus groups in the community. But most importantly, once you get past that management plan, that's all community driven, the implementation of the management plan and for projects and for programs depends on those community stakeholders. It's not a prescription that comes from the federal government. The ideas that are shared in the management plan for the preservation, protection of the natural, cultural, and historic assets actually are driven from the community, and then they're implemented in partnership with community organizations. So to answer your question directly, community is essential not only to the beginning and the feasibility stages of a national heritage area, but also to the long-term success of that national heritage area, implementing the ideas that the community wanted to have implemented when they created the management plan.
Ms. Capron, thank you. Back to Ms. Beasley. What would happen if the Park Service received a feasibility study for an area when there's a lot of opposition to the creation of a new heritage area?
Yes, sir. Well, as I mentioned, public support is one of the 10 criteria that are considered through the feasibility study process. And as I mentioned, public engagement is a big part of the feasibility study process. And the study team can and should take into consideration the public comments that they receive through that consultation process. But again, ultimately, it's up to the Congress to determine whether a heritage area should be designated.
Thank you. Ms. Beasley, Senate Bill 1942 seeks to standardize the establishment of heritage areas. Does the bill have any requirements for the Park Service or others to solicit feedback from local community members or elected officials?
So S 1942 would basically codify the existing feasibility study process and the existing study requirements, including the demonstration of public support. So the current study process already includes that stakeholder engagement.
Thank you, Ms. Beasley. Finally, I have a question about Senate Bill 2580, the Veterans in Parks Act, allowing free access to our parks for veterans and Gold Star families. As I talked about earlier, Chairman King and I were successful in enacting the Gold Star Families Park Pass last year, and this committee has worked on numerous veterans in parks bills before. How does Senate Bill 2580 differ and might complement the work we've already completed?
Yes, sir, that's a great question. So the bill would build on the important work that the Congress has already done in this area. Some of the benefits in the bill are already available, but under an administrative authority. So if this bill were enacted, it would provide certainty about the availability of those passes in the future.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Heinrich.
Ms. Keepan, independent studies have shown that national heritage areas offer indisputable economic benefits to their respective communities, and that revenue consistently matches any federal funding that may be applied to these NHAs. Can you just share some of the reasons why national heritage areas seem to offer such rewarding economic opportunities for local communities?
Certainly. So I think that the premise and the model that's set forward as a public-private partnership is part of it. And so that small amount of federal investment brings other partners to the table. And those partners don't just commit their resources, but they commit their time and energy. And this creates better synergy. It creates better partnerships for communities, but as a direct impact to businesses, it's such a great value because what we do is we just contribute a small amount and then others come in to match, which brings a greater amount and often leads to the execution and implementation of projects that simply wouldn't otherwise happen. And then there's the effects that come after the implementation of the project. I certainly cited our Discover Niagara shuttle and its benefit. So that shuttle brings people to other places within our national heritage area that they wouldn't have not naturally have gone to. And that brings them to small businesses, that brings them to those historical sites. And those small ripple effects then lead to those businesses, those historical sites, maybe adding additional jobs, maybe gaining additional revenue in gift shops, maybe giving people a compelling reason to stay longer, whether it's in the Northern Rio Grande Heritage Area or Niagara Falls or the Coal Region National Heritage Area. But heritage tourism and outdoor recreation are two of the largest growing sectors in the tourism industry field. And this is what national heritage areas do best. And it's also shown that cultural tourists spend more money than just a regular tourist. And so, you know, national heritage areas fit into that wheelhouse of tourism, but specifically generate a significant amount of economic impact, especially in small rural communities that might have been overlooked in larger industry sectors.
That has certainly been our experience in the Northern Rio Grande National Heritage Area. Ms. Beasley, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the sort of the coordination between the Park Service and communities, state and local governments, and that coordinated work that really enhances and supports existing national heritage areas. Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, and if you have any particular examples from the Northern Rio Grande Heritage Area, please share those as well.
Thank you. As Ms. Capen has already talked about, that public-private partnership is really key and foundational to the success of the programs. And because heritage areas and their coordinating entities are grassroots and on the ground, they're able to really connect with the local communities and their stakeholders and identify the kinds of projects and services and benefits that are important to that community. In your opening statement, you spoke about the La Sala de San Jose Preservation Project in Galisteo, New Mexico, which was a great partnership. The Heritage Area worked directly with the State Historic Preservation Office to ensure that the work that was being done was appropriate to the building. I will also share in Dixon, New Mexico. The Heritage Area provided a subgrant to the Embudo Valley Library and Community Center, where they were able to fund student and community volunteer projects to create a community mural. They also did a kind of a landscape documentation project that identified some of the important historic features of the area and did some landscaping work to beautify the grounds. The Heritage Area provided funding to the Oke-Owingeh Housing Authority to put together a adobe mud plastering training that helped the members of the community learn traditional preservation methods that they could apply to the buildings that are important to them. And then in Cuesta, New Mexico, the Heritage Area partnered with the Park Service's River Trails and Conservation Assistance Program to plan and provide signage for an interpretive trail that goes around the town and highlights significant properties, including the historic acequias and other important landscape features. And so the RTCA grant provided the planning dollars, and then the Heritage Area provided the interpretive signage. So very much examples of on-the-ground, community-based activities.
And Chairman, I know it sounds fairly trivial, but something like training people how to do adobe mud plastering, for example, it's very easy to really inadvertently destroy some of our historic structures in the Southwest by not knowing the proper methodologies for actually protecting them. If you put concrete or stucco over adobe mud plaster, you actually end up trapping moisture inside, and then structures that have stood for hundreds and hundreds of years, like older than the United States as a country, end up being inadvertently destroyed. So the work that they're doing around preservation is really, really critical to our history.
Senator Kelly is on his way. I have a couple of questions in the meantime. Ms. Capon, how do people know about a heritage center? I'm sorry, about a heritage area. Is there signage? Is there a national registry? Is there some place you can go and say, I'm going through New England and I wonder where the heritage areas are? How do people find out about what's going on in these special regions?
Well, I think one of the best ways if you're traveling through New England or other places is to go to the NPS.gov site where National Heritage Areas have websites that are not only maintained by the National Park Service, but also direct you to our individual websites. Some heritage areas do have signage. Erie Canalway National Heritage Corridor is a good example. They have signage all the way from Albany to Buffalo. Again, what makes it individual is that National Heritage Areas, based on the resources and based on what the community feels that they want, will utilize those resources to tell their story. So again, I know I'm using examples of Niagara Falls. We didn't focus on signage because we have Niagara Falls State Park, which is the oldest state park in the country. And quite frankly, we have a sign, too many signs. And so we focused on connecting to people who might be traveling to Niagara Falls through social media and through websites. But there's a lot of ways. We also have the Alliance of National Heritage Area website where people can learn more there too.
Ms. Beasley, a question about funding. Are the National Heritage Areas funded en masse in one line, or are they funded individually? How does the administration of the support work?
So each heritage area is individually designated. It has its own legislation and its own specificity that comes from that. So the funding levels for heritage areas are subject to appropriations, but they vary based on the terms of when the heritage area was authorized.
So, in the appropriations process, there's a line for each area that could be different.
Yes, well, there's a total appropriated amount, and then there are a series of tiered formulas that identify the amount of funding from that overall appropriation that individual heritage areas receive.
And what's the overall appropriation this year for National Heritage Areas?
I believe it was 20.9 million.
Thank you. We're waiting for Senator Kelly. We'll wait a few more minutes. Are there questions that we haven't addressed that you would like to bring forward to the committee? In other words, this is an opportunity to make a statement that we haven't covered. We've asked all the good questions. We'll wait a few minutes for Senator Kelly. Oh, Senator Hickenlooper is here. Senator Hickenlooper, are you ready to? I am ready. Thank you.
Let's see. Perfect. Ms. Beasley, I'll start with you. And we were listening to your guys' testimony. I apologize for being late. Somehow they've scheduled multiple hearings that are all of importance to Colorado. But nothing more important than this. Ms. Beasley, I want to thank you for your work with the national parks. The Amache National the Amachi National Historic Site, I think would provide an unparalleled opportunity for Coloradans and Americans to learn about the horrors of Japanese internment and ensure that our collective memory of these atrocities does not diminish with time. Survivors and descendants are engaged, they're watching closely. In many cases, they've been waiting their whole lives for this designation. So can you speak a little bit about the cultural benefits of passing this legislation now, while we still have the ability to hear their stories and make sure those stories are preserved and passed along?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your question. As you're probably aware, there's currently a special resource study focused on Amachi that's currently underway that was authorized under the Dingell Act. Amachi tells the story of the Grenada Relocation Center, which was one of 10 relocation centers that were built during World War II to detain Japanese Americans who were forcibly removed from the West Coast under the terms of an executive order. And over 10,000 people passed through Amachi, which at its peak housed over 7,300 incarcerees, about 2/3 of whom were U.S. citizens. So without question, Amachi tells the story of a painful and shameful time in our nation's history.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think that's important to make sure that we're all on that same page. Ms. Capen, thank you for joining us. Even if by Zoom, we've all become so accustomed to Zoom, it's almost as good as being in person. You mentioned in your testimony that the national historic sites can often revitalize communities economically. And I know firsthand, I opened one of the first brew pubs in the country back in 1988 and got a historic designation for our building and then eventually our neighborhood. And then did the same thing in Omaha and Des Moines, Rapid City, South Dakota. And we saw great benefit from taking history and making sure that it was preserved and available. And I think the Amachi National Historic Site, the cultural benefits there are so numerous, and I think even when our history is shameful, we need to make sure we preserve it. So I thought I'd ask you whether, in terms of the economic benefits of establishing a national historic site in a place like Grenada, Colorado, which is a agricultural community, it's a population a little over 500, some smaller communities around it, but a place still trying to grow and trying to add businesses.
So I think that, and just from the reference from national heritage areas, is national heritage areas span a lot of different landscapes. They span urban to rural communities. So when you add a historical site, not only is it, and this is the most important part, is it's deeply meaningful to preserving our history and sharing it, as you said, so that we don't lose that collective memory. And oftentimes in places like that, people pause and reflect, and they need to pause and reflect, but they often stay in a place. And that can create new small businesses, whether it's a cafe, whether it's a small restaurant, or whether it's, additional interpretation that just keeps people to stay a little bit longer there, to think more deeply about that story. That's what we see throughout national heritage areas, and that's part of the significance of historic preservation, is that it should be deeply reflective. And it should be meaningful. It's very different than an amusement park where you can go through and get out, and it's exciting. History is exciting as well, but it's also reflective, and the economic benefits to communities often surround that. So if you go to Old Fort Niagara here in Niagara Falls National Heritage Area, it makes you really think about the layers of history that were shaped there. And you're more likely to stay. You're more likely to have a meal in the nearby community. You're more likely to say, next time when I want to schedule a trip, maybe I'll go back there.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Actually, while I was governor in Colorado, we moved our cultural affairs into the Office of Economic Development for many of those same reasons. I yield back, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to take a moment to thank you and the subcommittee for adding to the agenda S-2580, the Alexander Lofgren Veterans in Parks Act. This bill is a special place in the hearts of Arizonans, including myself, Senator Sinema, and especially Congressman Grijalva in the House. The bill honors a congressional caseworker and an Army veteran, Alex Lofgren, who lost his life in April of this year. Alex was deeply passionate about serving veterans, serving Arizonans, but he also had a great love for the outdoors. And passage of this bill is important for memorializing Alex's service to Arizona, to our veterans, and to our nation. And I hope that we can move quickly to send this bill to the President. So thank you for that, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the subcommittee. Ms. Beasley, good morning. Thank you for being here today. I want to ask you about S-1318. It's my bill to reauthorize grant funding for the Yuma Crossing National Heritage Area, and thank you for supporting this bill. Yuma Crossing played an important role in the history of the West. It is a natural granite outcrop used by indigenous people, Spanish explorers, and tens of thousands of gold rush pioneers, as it's the narrowest point to cross the Colorado River into California from Arizona. And the crossing made Yuma a center for interstate commerce in the late 1800s, and later supported a vital bridge for locomotives and motor vehicles. Yuma's NHA is funded primarily through donations from local and tribal governments and private individuals. And according to a 2015 Park Service review of the Yuma NHA, only 1/5 of the Yuma NHA budget is funded by the Park Service. In fact, Yuma NHA only receives 1/3 of the full $1 million that is authorized from the Park Service each year. Even with so few resources, the return on investment for the federal government is quite remarkable. The Yuma NHA has an estimated economic impact of about $22.7 million annually. So, Ms. Beasley, how successful would you rate Yuma's leveraging of Park Service funding to that of most other national heritage areas?
Thank you, sir. So Yuma Crossing, at least since 2015, has continued to meet its non-federal match requirement. And as you point out, has leveraged other sources of funding, grown their partnerships. They're doing great. And we always encourage heritage areas that are having success in seeking other fund sources. Those best practices are great examples that they can share with other national heritage areas. And, you know, Yuma Crossing is an on-the-ground example of the leverage that the $20.9 million in federal funding that we provided in 2020 translates into $85.5 million in cash and in-kind donations that are coming from other sources. So keep up the good work, Yuma Crossing. Yes, sir.
Well, thank you for that, Ms. Beasley. Our national heritage areas and our national parks in Arizona are so important, not only to the folks that like to enjoy them, but also to the economy. So thank you. And I yield back the remainder of my time.
No further questions? If there are no further questions, I'd like to thank our witnesses for their testimony today. Members of the committee may submit additional questions in writing, and if so, we would ask you to submit answers for the record. Committee members will have until 6 p.m. tomorrow to submit any additional questions for the record. We will keep the hearing record open for 2 weeks to receive any additional comments. I want to thank our witnesses once again for your excellent and illuminating testimony. We appreciate your work on behalf of your communities and the country. This hearing is adjourned.